a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court's conservative majority has ruled that Louisiana's 2024 election map was, in their words, an unconstitutional racial gerrymander, delivering a significant victory to Republicans in a major decision that narrows the landmark Voting Rights Act. The High Court upheld a lower court ruling yesterday, saying the state's map makers relied too heavily on race when they redrew the state's voting boundaries. Our next guest, speaking out against that decision yesterday by the Supreme Court, writing on social media, "This is a green light for unconstitutional attacks on the voting rights that generations of Americans bled and died to secure." The author of those words joins us now, Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. He's also a member of the Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees and the author of the new book titled Stand. Senator Booker, thank you for joining us. It is indeed the front page of the New York Times banner headline here that reads, "Decision deals blow to Voting Rights Act." So if you would, sir, remind viewers of the history here, why this was put in place in the first place, and now your fears as to what could happen next.
We had a civil war in this country, and in the aftermath of that, we had a brief period of black representation of all throughout the South when there were fair elections, equal voting power. The first black senators and congresspeople came, and then within a decade, all of that black representation was eviscerated because those southern states moved to suppress blacks' voting rights and redraw maps so that it was impossible for a black person to again be elected, even though some of those states had upwards of 40+% African Americans. And then a movement began. And over the next century, African Americans returned to Congress. In fact, the first one from North Carolina came in the 90s. The black senators started returning. I'm the fourth black elected in the United States history after Barack Obama, number 3. And we started to finally, since the battles and fights, blacks and whites joining together in a rainbow coalition to establish what we have today, the Voting Rights Act. And what the Supreme Court has now done is eviscerate that act. And what you see southern states openly talking about doing now is eliminating black representation, disenfranchising African-American voters by drawing creative districts that completely take away any kind of representation. And so when you ask about the history, we all stand. I am here as a United States Senator because of Americans of all backgrounds who joined together in a movement to end this kind of discrimination. And the Supreme Court, with the aid and abetting of Donald Trump, are now eviscerating those rights. And we're going to see, I think, us plunging back into a world where African Americans from many states, again, disappear from Congress.
Now, already, of course, gerrymandering, redistricting was a topic of conversation this year because of the ongoing battles in a couple of states, started at President Trump's request in Texas by Republicans. Let's make that clear. Now, some analysts said yesterday, well, if the polls are to be believed, that the Democrats are on track for a big win this November, regardless, no matter what happens with these maps. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But speak to a senator, it's not just about this one cycle. It's not just about like, oh, well, the blue wave will overcome it. Remind us what this could mean for elections for decades to come.
Yeah, this is not about left or right. It's not about Democrat or Republican. It's about fair elections in America. It goes to the very core of who we are as a democracy. This is a moral moment. What kind of nation will we be? What Donald Trump has done is saying that we should be a nation where a political party, once they have power, can actually do creatively suppressing equal rights at the ballot box and holding on to that power in anti-democratic means. And so we have a clear difference now. We have Democrats who voted unanimously back in 2021, 2022 to end partisan gerrymandering. We have a Republican Party that voted to continue what we're doing now. And Donald Trump, as an accelerant, did midterm redistricting. And so this election now, the stakes have just risen. They really have. This is no longer about which party is going to control. This is now a movement election. Will a movement join together again to say enough of this partisan gerrymandering? We need to elect a Congress who will vote that legislation and put it on the desk of a president, God willing, in 28 after those elections, that will end this nightmare. So we don't have entire states, blue states and red states, that have no kind of representation for minority groups, no representation for the minority party whatsoever. We are spiraling towards being an anti-democratic country. We need to reclaim our democracy. That's what's on the ballot in November, and I hope people will come out and vote to save our country from this kind of discrimination and this kind of anti-democratic leadership.
Well, we will have much more on the Supreme Court decision in the days ahead. Senator Booker, let's turn now. You sit on the Foreign Relations Committee. Let's turn now to the situation in Iran. There are, at this moment, no negotiations planned. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Price of oil surging, and now reporting that President Trump is at least considering breaking the ceasefire and resuming attacks on Iran. You've obviously been sharply critical of his handling of this conflict to getting us to this point. But now that we're here, what would you say is the best way out?
Well, I'm sharply critical because this will go down as one of the greatest presidential blunders. In many ways, it's repeating history of us getting mired in another Middle East war that's costing us billions of dollars of taxpayer money. And in this case, it's costing Americans thousands and thousands of dollars at the pump and for consumer goods as inflation and the cost of everything is going up because of this president's tragic mistakes. And yes, we're in it now, but we should have never, ever gotten into this war when we had other options to achieve the goals that he stated. And remember, the goals he stated, they still have their highly enriched fissile material there. They are now a more radical regime than they were before. And now they've realized this asymmetric power. Low-cost drones can still inflict damage to more powerful countries, and we can choke the Strait of Hormuz. So what should we be doing in this moment? Well, number one, the president should come forward and state the facts. Congress should have hearings to expose these failures, how his strategy completely miscalculated the costs of this war and the ability to succeed. He needs to turn not away from his allies, but to our allies, those that helped us to get that first Iran deal, where they were shipping out highly enriched uranium, where there were spot inspections and where there was caps. We need to turn to sensible foreign policy, but that cannot be achieved if one branch of our government, the branch that's supposed to provide oversight and accountability, checks and balances, if Republicans in Congress are saying we're not going to do our job, we're not going to hold this president accountable, we're not going to debate and deliberate the right strategies that should be employed, we're going to let a reckless, chaotic, corrupt president continue to draw us deeper and deeper into a mired conflict that's costing Americans thousands and thousands of dollars in every household.
And Senator, connected, of course, situation in Iran is the ongoing strikes in Lebanon by Israel. There's ceasefire there, but seems very fragile. There's reporting today that President Trump told Prime Minister Netanyahu that if he even is targeting Hezbollah there in Lebanon, it needs to be done surgically, saying don't knock down any sorts of buildings. What is your take on the way Prime Minister Netanyahu is sort of prosecuting that particular conflict? Do you worry it could spiral out of control? Could it indeed jeopardize the ceasefire we have with Iran?
Yeah, Netanyahu is so similar to Donald Trump. He's corrupt and he has bankrupt strategies. From what's happening in Lebanon that's not surgical about Hezbollah, all the way to what's happening in the West Bank right now, which is some of the most flagrant violations of human rights and state-supported violence that undermines the principles of Americans on both sides of the political aisle, who for many presidents past would speak out against what's going on in the West Bank right now. I will continue to lead to hold Netanyahu accountable. I lead on West Bank legislation. We want to see a strong Israel in that region. This is a prime minister who is weakening Israel and opening them up, unfortunately, to the kind of vulnerabilities that I cannot stomach, seeing Israel become more and more, like the United States, mired in conflicts that weaken their position and don't strengthen their defense.
And Senator, lastly, we want to turn to a piece of legislation you introduced yesterday, the CLEAN Act, which is about mergers, particularly media mergers, antitrust legislation. Tell us about it.
Well, we have a staggering reality right now where we see this massive corporate concentration going on. In this case, in how we get our news with CBS, CNN, even TikTok, all being consolidated around one family. And the way people are going about getting mergers approved now has nothing to do with the enforcement of antitrust law, independent reviews by agencies. It is just by how much you can dote on Donald Trump. either include him in the deal making or lavish him with gifts to his ballroom or other ill-gotten gains for this president. And so what we're simply saying with this legislation is, hey, everybody's being put on notice. This Trump season will come to an end, and every one of your mergers is going to be re-examined on the law, on antitrust law, and we will unravel mergers that work against the public interest and against the antitrust law. And so I want everybody to know, we've actually written letters to tell everybody, preserve documents, because we're going to make sure that we examine all of the paper trail. And if you entered into corrupt agreements with Donald Trump or agreements against the law and public interest, we're going to unwind your merger. Let's be clear. In the United States of America, a merger of this size that's going to constrain the ability for Americans to get independent news and information, constrain the amount of art that's created, cost thousands of jobs, and drive up prices for Americans, those mergers will get the highest scrutiny once Donald Trump and his corrupt regime, frankly, is over.
Covering a lot of ground for us this morning, Democratic member of the Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Senator, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's now bring in